We're going in depth this afternoon into a possible law that gives terminally ill patients new hope in finding treatments that work. It's called Right to Try, and it gives patients access to medicines that haven't completely gone through the FDA approval process. I had the opportunity to speak with a strong advocate for that law. And joining me right now from Tallahassee is Craig Handzlik, who is with the Goldwater Institute, the state policy coordinator for that group. Mr. Handzlik, thank you for joining us. Tell me what this Right to Try law proposal is all about.
Sure. So the Right to Try essentially allows terminally ill patients, in conjunction with their physicians, to access medications that have passed the first phase of the FDA's clinical trials process and are still ongoing under investigation. This would allow terminally ill patients the ability to have access to these medications much sooner than they would otherwise, should they have to wait for the full approvals process of the FDA's clinical trials, which can take upwards of 12 years and cost roughly $1 billion.
So how many phases are there? If this is phase 1 of clinical trials, how many phases before they actually get to the market?
Sure. So there are 3 phases and then final approval. So the first phase tests for safety and toxicity. Essentially what the first phase is saying in the Right to Try context is that, listen, we understand that this medication is not toxic for human consumption, but we do know that the underlying illness that the patient has is going to kill them. So why not let them have the medication prior to the full approvals process being finished, which would allow them a chance to try to save their own lives.
Now, are there any provisions on the books that will allow this right now? Because isn't there something called compassionate use, or is that something different?
So compassionate use, or some people refer to it as expanded access, is the FDA's version of Right to Try. It was developed for the HIV AIDS outbreak in the 90s, and in and of itself, it's a great program. The only difficult part about expanded access or compassionate use is that it takes upwards of 100 physician hours of paperwork just to apply to be a part of the program. If you think about that in terms of just pure physician work hours, that's 2.5 weeks of 40-hour work weeks for a physician just to fill out one application for one patient. Additionally, the manufacturing company also has to fill out a large amount of paperwork, and that goes to the FDA for approval, which usually will take, according to them, about 30 days. Should they have any additional questions about the paperwork that you've submitted, they'll send it back down to the originator of the paperwork, and the 30-day clock starts all over again. And so this is just time that terminally ill patients do not have when they're in the end stage of their battle with their illness.
So because the FDA is the regulatory agency on this is a federal authority, is this a states' rights issue? Because why would the Florida legislature then be looking at it if this is a federal issue?
Sure. So this is very much a states' rights issue. You'll see that the Constitution allows certain leeway with regard to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of different individual freedoms. It grants states the leeway to adopt different rights for their citizens in that regard.
So basically the patients would have to sign away their right to sue, but I guess if you have a terminal disease, suing is probably the last thing that's on your mind, right?
Yeah, that's a fair way of putting it. So a patient, in conjunction with their physician, would fill out an informed consent form, which would essentially disclose all of the potential benefits and adverse effects, and give certain protections to manufacturers, to physicians, to their insurance company, so that they could really just have an additional an additional arrow in their quiver to fight their end-stage illness.
Now, this does hit home for me for many years ago because my father had cancer and he was trying to be placed on interferon 1. This was years ago, and had a heck of a time getting approved for it. And then secondly, the question to you is, well, who pays for these drugs then? Do the companies give them to you? Insurance companies will not pay for investigational drugs normally.
True, that's a great question, Al. Thank you. So the way the bill is designed and the intent of the bill is to allow manufacturers to provide the medications to patients free of charge. Additionally, they could charge the patient as much as it costs them to recoup the cost of producing that dose or device or whatever the situation may be for the patient. It's not designed to allow manufacturers leeway to recoup costs for all the research and development dollars that have gone into it. But yes, the language of the bill also says clearly that insurance companies are not required to cover the cost of the medication, though they can should they want to, and physicians also don't have to participate. This is not an end-all, be-all for every patient, but what it does is it opens a door for a patient, a physician, and a manufacturer to help to try to save the patient's life. Who walks through it at what time is really up to the individual.
Yeah, and obviously the benefit for the drug companies, if it works miraculously on some people, it will help them, down the line selling the product. And so lastly, how many states have these kind of right to try laws?
Sure. So in 2014, 5 states passed it. That's Colorado, Missouri, Louisiana, Michigan, and Arizona. So far this session, 3 states have signed the right to try into law. That is Arkansas, South Dakota, and Wyoming. 3 additional states that I know of right now have transmitted the bill to their governor, and it's awaiting signature. And doing some rough math, that leaves about 23 additional states that have that have right to try moving through their legislatures currently.
And last question, Craig, because we're almost out of time. What's the chances this is going to get passed in Florida, and who's the biggest opposition you face?
You know, we have not faced a lot of opposition in Florida. We've got a great group of legislators here with Senator Brandis and Representative Pilon working together with all of the stakeholders to iron out the language for Florida. So I feel very confident that it'll pass here in Florida, and Governor Scott will sign it into law.
Craig Handzlik with the Goldwater Institute, thank you for your time. We'll keep our eyes and see what happens.
Thank you.
The right to try laws aren't just on the docket in Florida. Arizona, Arkansas, Colorado, Louisiana, and several other states all have those measures in place. In fact, 25 additional states are considering that law this year alone.